I'm sure just like you and me and everybody else, we can't help but notice the huge amount of focus on shows on TV, on radio, on near-death experiences. CNN, all different channels now are having their share of people that talk about their experiences, and not all of them are alike. Today's guest is Jennifer Diamond, and she has written a book that is called Waking Up Psychic, and she had a near-death experience that changed her life. And today, with her hopefully thousands of fans that have visited her site and may be interested in her new focus on gathering psychics and psychic development, she can fill us in with all kinds of details about this journey. So with no more hesitation, hi there, Jennifer, and how are you today?
Hi, Ann Marie. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and you're a beautiful woman. I wanted to say that. You have wonderful pictures, and I just saw you briefly on video, and you don't look any worse for wear.
Well, thank you so much.
So I guess why don't we just look at your history and your story, and you know, anybody that would like to call into the show with a specific question for Jennifer Diamond about her journey or about afterlife. We're not doing readings today, guys. We are focusing on the journey of the afterlife and her book. So take it over.
You know, when you're going through this, or when you've come out of an accident like I did, I was in a car accident in 1989, and waking up in the hospital, waking up psychic, when you're going through this whole experience, you really don't think that your life is any different, or I should say my life was quite different, but you don't realize that it's such a story until years later. At least that's what happened to me. Years down the road, having this psychic ability, I've met numerous people that have been born with this ability or came from families with third, fourth, fifth generation, you know, psychics. And for me, it was a little bit different in the respect that I went on vacation to Florida and got in a car accident almost immediately after I got there, like the next day, actually. And so the day and a half that I was there, everything seemed to kind of all run together. But waking up in the hospital close to 2 days later was really the biggest shock. And people always ask me, you know, what was it like when you were on the other side? Because I went from 1 minute laying by a swimming pool to the next minute being surrounded by bright lights and, you know, in a completely different dimension. So, you know, this has been, it's been very life-changing, to say the least, but I didn't realize it until, I would have to say recently, until like probably the last 10 years, you know, with people, you know, more and more wanting to find out about, you know, the afterlife and psychics. You know, back in the early 90s, there was no social media, there was no internet, so
Isn't that strange to think? You know, that was not that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago, but it feels like ages ago.
It's just all changed.
Yeah.
You know, but not all people that have you know, experiences as you end up being psychic, though, do they?
No, they don't. But when I was in this accident, when I woke up, I had lost my memory. That was a big portion of it. But as I came to find out, you know, years down the road, that having memory loss from head trauma and having psychic ability is actually not as rare as I had originally thought. It's actually more common than we realize. So as much as I felt very alone over the years, after doing research and, you know, once the internet became very popular, I realized that there was a lot of other people out there that have experienced the same thing as myself. So, you know, that has actually opened up a lot of a lot of avenues for me. But like I said, it was difficult at first when you feel very, very alone, because for a long time I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't talk about it to anybody. So, it was difficult. It was a difficult road in the beginning.
So do you describe the lights as people, beings, energy? What do you think they were as you felt this crossing, into the next dimension while you were after your accident?
Yeah. Well, I actually went, like I said, from literally laying by the pool to my next recollection of anything was really being surrounded by white lights, and who I really knew was in front of me was God. And I, for a long time just didn't want to talk about this, or was very shy in talking about it or communicating to other people what I had seen, until I actually had started realizing that other people had the same experience as me. I didn't, a lot of times you'll hear people going down, like they go through a dark tunnel, or,
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
Yeah, I didn't experience any dark tunnel. For me, it was really going from one scenario to another. And once I was in this other dimension, there was no words spoken. Any thought that I had in my mind was instantly answered. And, I was able to view, at that point I was 21, I was able to view, it was as if they were showing me my last 21 years on a screen. It was kind of interesting, but, to describe these things to people in the very beginning was difficult for me. But at this point in my life, where I'm at now, like I said, it's interesting to know that there's a lot of other people out there that have, gone through the same thing. And for me, talking to this, who I describe as God, telling me about, what my life is going to be, and that, it wasn't my time to go yet, but I had set out on a certain path in this lifetime. And, it wasn't, for me, it was all about understanding unconditional love. For some people, it's a little bit different. Some people they're going to come back from a life near-death experience and either teach or, whatever it is. I've heard hundreds of stories. For me, it was really, just understanding, in short, that we're all here and basically trying to figure it out on our own. And it's really, I think we complicate life too much. And, it's really understanding that our whole purpose for being here is really all about unconditional love and how we can help each other out. And, like I said, you haven't had a chance to read my book yet, but what I talk about in the book is, the biggest lesson that I learned from all this is what you do for others, you do for yourself. And it sounds like such a simple phrase, but really in the end, it really is. Once you start doing things for other people without expecting anything in return, you can see a complete shift in your life and how things open up. And, that was it sounds, like I said, it sounds so simple, but once you go down.
It doesn't sound simple at all. It sounds real. And isn't that just like what the Bible says, do unto others as you would have done unto you, or, give unconditionally, and you find that your energy comes back the same way. Were you a religious person before this happened?
I actually was I don't want to say very religious, but I grew up in a fairly Catholic family, and about a year after this, my accident, I had moved to Florida from New York, and I hadn't seen my grandmother in it had been probably 12, 13 months, and I was talking to her on the phone, and she was kind of struggling with something, which was personal, and I obviously hadn't seen her, and I had brought it up to her and kind of gave her advice on what to do. But I caught her off guard because I brought up personal things that nobody knew except for her. And she asked me, how do you know that? And I told her that as a result of the accident, I had abilities that, were different than what I had before. And she, kind of pried a little bit and, wanted to know more. And I said, psychic ability. And she, my grandparents, I went to church with them every weekend. I spent every weekend with them when I was growing up. And when I said that to her, she just very quietly said, I don't ever want you to bring this up again. I don't want you to talk about this again. And I never did. I never brought it up to anybody. And I've never really spoke much about this to my family. Over the years, it's really been more to strangers until I got pregnant in 2006 with my daughter. That was when my abilities started to shift a bit. And, I was able to see more stuff than I did before that. So, it was a constant struggle with growing up in a Catholic family and to, have this, so to speak.
Do you feel that your experience was anything that you perceived it would be? I mean, like when we're little, we're told that such and such will happen and we will be at the pearly gates or whatever. Did you feel or experience any similarities to what your religious doctrine said? Or do you feel it's even deeper and even more complex?
Oh, I definitely feel it's deeper and more complex. I mean, when I had the experience of what I had in the hospital when I wasn't awake, I was not awake for about 20 hours, 25 hours, give or take. And that whole experience showed me a completely different side to, kind of what we learn or what, at least what Catholics are taught to, believe in. And I did struggle with it for a long time. Now I talk about it more openly because things have changed and, more people are open to talking about near-death experiences and as far as it goes with their religion and stuff. But I felt that, over the course of what I learned back in 1989 when I went through this and continuing to go to church and continuing to go down my path, there was definitely there was a difference between the two because I knew what I was told back then, and everything over the years has unfolded just like it was told to me during this exchange that I had, so to speak. So I think it's hard to put into words if you haven't been through it. But the other side, the main thing I can say is that where we go from here is definitely nothing to be scared of. It's only to be something to look forward to. Is the nicest way.
Do you think that? Do you believe that's the same for everybody, or do you believe that? Like I was watching, I think a show on Crossing Over, and this one guy was talking about how he had been a gambler and unethical and a person that, he would not be proud of. And he was very, he had a massive heart attack. And he remembers thinking, oh, crap, I guess this is what's going to come next, the hell, the brimfire. But to his surprise, he said he went into this unconditional love, as you said, and he was washed clean, he said. And when he came back, he was a different person. So he did not experience the hell and brimstone that he had been taught, and we have all been taught, but more so this washing of his personality, this cleansing of his ethics, and his whole personality changed, and he became the man that he wanted to be, that now that he had the second. Now, of course, I've also heard other things, when you think about serial killers and people like that, and what do they experience? Can they really just be washed clean, or is there any kind of karmic value there? But I guess the main thing is it doesn't matter. What matters is us. What matters is our own journey. What matters is, like you said, taking that profound experience with you and trying to make wisdom out of it. And you said you're asked about, questions from people all the time on it, right?
All the time. Yeah. One thing that I can tell you is that, we set up, before we come here, which is one of the things I was shown, is that we set up certain things that we need to accomplish in this lifetime, whatever it is. And from friends, family, work, love, whatever it is that you need to learn in this lifetime, if you haven't achieved it, or you've, because there's a such thing as called free will, and sometimes people get caught up in that and they don't follow, it's like that gut instinct. You should be doing something else, but you choose the safer or the easier route or something that's more comfortable. In this lifetime, if you haven't achieved what you set out for, then, and I believe this, I've talked to other people about this, but if you haven't achieved that in this lifetime, you come right back until, that's why you can line up, and I give this example because then people can kind of understand it, but you can line up 10, 20-year-old people. Let's just it doesn't matter female or male. Some act like they're 20, some act like they're 40, some act like they're 5. But, the range of how they act is very different. But the reason that is because we've all heard that phrase, oh, that person's an old soul, or,
right.
That young soul. And it's because either they've been here many lifetimes and they're working it out and they're on their right path, and this could be one of their last lifetimes, or they're new to this world and they're just starting out, and there's a naivety about them, which is, I always find that attractive and in people I meet, regardless of their age. But yeah, you definitely, there's when you're on the other side, it was made clear to me that it wasn't my time. It wasn't even a question. I didn't even have to ask it, because everything they were showing me, I understood that I had to come back. But one thing I can say is that when you're there, you don't experience any negative thoughts, feelings, or emotions. There's none of that. The heaviness that we have in this human body doesn't exist. Once you're on the other side, all you feel is complete, overwhelming love. And it's, to even put it into words you can't completely.
Too shallow. Words are too one-dimensional.
Yeah, it really is. But I've probably talked to 150, 200 people in the last 25, almost 26 years now, that have had near-death experiences, and I've yet to meet one person that's experienced that is, none of them are afraid of dying. It really gives you something to look forward to from here, but it also gives you, gives you an opportunity when you're here to live your life really to the fullest, and to live a more conscious life, not worry about what happened yesterday, and not pay so much attention to tomorrow or next week, but to really live and enjoy your day, day by day. That's the most important thing. But, it's easier said than done sometimes, unfortunately. So.
I think about the woman the young woman that was taken by the terrorists.
Oh.
Kayla, was that her name? I think.
The one recent? Which one? The one recently?
The one blonde that went around the world trying to help out peace. And she said that her way of finding God was through the suffering in others' eyes. And she made her entire life about being able to heal other people in times of war and stuff. And then she was taken by ISIS, and she was held since 2013, and they believe she was sold off as a bride. And then during the bombing that just went off in Jordan on ISIS, after the burning of that one man, they said that she was bombed and killed in this building. But either way, no matter what the circumstances, I always think that she must have been an old soul. And I believe there are certain people that are born on this earth like her, or, like Buddha or Jesus or whoever, that must have just this amazing, amazing energy. But interestingly, when I read on that or read on people like that, it always comes out the same. That once you're on the other side, all people are equal.
Oh, absolutely.
You're not more exceptional because you led a better or more pure or more meaningful life, because you're brought back to the chrysalis, or you're brought back to you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
and so
no,
and
absolutely.
there's no politics in the other side. So whatever you do for the world on this side, on this world in the now, is for the now, but it's not necessarily going to be something that you can bring on to the other side.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. And it's funny you bring that up, because I write about this in my book, because it was, a couple of things that stand out that was shown to me, like I said, was about the unconditional love. We've all heard it, to have unconditional love for somebody, that's true love, or, whether it be for your parents or your child, but to really have unconditional love for people, that's not always an easy, that's not always something easy to accept. But the other thing I learned when I was having this experience, this near-death experience, was that we really are all interconnected. Here on Earth, we have different races and different backgrounds, whether it be, you come from a different country or a different state, your upbringing,
religion, whatever.
Your religion. I mean, we have, we have tag phrases for everybody. We like to label people. But when you're on the other side, you really understand how ridiculous that is. And so once you're able to grasp that, and you're able to look at people, you could look at somebody and say, like, oh, how could we be connected, or how could we be connected to these individuals, that the ISIS group that's doing all this harm. But unfortunately, some people come here and they do things that are horrific, and they will not be, you don't get to be here in this body and live on Earth and do horrific things and then go to the afterlife and live happily ever after. That's not what was shown to me. And in certain cases, extreme cases, which is not something I like to go into, but they sit more so in a holding pattern over there until they're ready to come back. But for the most part, people come here and they learn at the rate that they're trying to learn, and they keep coming back until they get their lessons, whatever their lessons are. It's different for you, it's different for me. Everybody has their own advancement that they need to learn in this lifetime. But yeah, the girl that you're talking about, absolutely, she I believe that she was an old soul, and unfortunately, though, like I said, sometimes free will kicks in, and we, as much as we want to help other people, sometimes we take it to the extreme, and, things tend to take place like what happened with her. It's unfortunate, but, her intentions were right. And when you do things with good intentions, that has a lot to do with your progression here. So
wouldn't part of her heaven be also the fact that she's left a legacy here on Earth?
Absolutely.
I mean, isn't that a heaven, to leave and have a legacy? If people say she was an amazing person, she did so many wonderful things. I do want to say to Jan and to Debbie in the call room, we're only talking about crossing over today, and we would rather take questions on the InQuick about anything that you may have to add on about the crossing over journey. Otherwise, you will have to wait until next No, Cindy, we will not be giving love readings. We are doing only crossing over information today. So, go on. What
Love is
maybe
in the air. Love is in the
hmm,
air all this month.
it is. It's Valentine's Day. Love is in the air. And I do want to say hello to Linda and Linda from LA, Cindy from Canada. I want to say hi to Sunny from Tennessee and Rebecca. And okay, and Rebecca, no, we are not reading about anything other than crossing over and today. So please, questions posted to Jennifer about her experience. I do want to say there are two questions. One question was from Rebecca. Jennifer, did it hurt to die? Or I mean to visit the other side. Did it hurt?
Absolutely not. In fact, it was the first time in my life that I actually felt completely 100% at peace. To the point that obviously, I didn't want to come back, but like I said, I knew it wasn't my time. But when I did come back, it was such an elated feeling that coming back was the difficult part. When I woke up and I started coming through over the next day in the hospital, then yes, it hurt because I had a broken nose.
Back in your old body again.
Back in my old body again, but absolutely not. And even people that have difficulties here, whether they're in a wheelchair or they've got issues with their body, cancers, whatever it is, once they travel over to the other side, they are fine. There's no, you don't experience any pain, hurt, anger, suffering. There's none of that on the other side.
And we also have another question from Rebecca, and she says, do we really have free will, or are we always on our destiny? Well, the thing is, I think those are profound questions that can only be answered when you're on the other side. Because I believe that there's messages for everybody when they cross over. But I think that, how would you answer that, Jennifer? Do we really have free will, or are we always on our destiny?
We always have free will. That's why that's why I meet people all the time, that I meet women all the time that want to know, it's always the same questions with, am I going to get back together with my ex, or, with the love related questions. You'll tend to meet people. It's like the same people always have. You'll have a girlfriend that always has bad luck with guys. It's like her whole story. She always meets the wrong guy, or it never quite works out. That's free will. You have the free will to either go down a different path, or you're able to keep going towards what isn't exactly right for you, but because you're attracted to, let's say, a bad boy, you always tend to pick the wrong type of guys, but that's because you have free will. So absolutely,
I think it's also because people confuse anxiety with love.
Yeah.
Anxiety is not chemistry. Well, it could be, but anxiety and chemistry are two different things. Anxiety is walking on glass, but either way, regardless of any of that, I would say that okay, I'm just looking at some quick questions. The main thing that we want to look at for your new book then is, Jennifer, what?
So many things. I'm thinking about it all in a glance. The biggest thing really is if everybody out. It's so hard to say to people, like we talked about a minute ago, with kind of understanding that we are all interconnected. If everybody understood that, this world would be a much easier place. But where we go from here, it would be a much more peaceful place. But I can say that where we go from here really is something to look forward to. But your time while you're here on earth. You really do need to make the most of it. And, it's the more you can do for other people is when you really start opening up your life to finding I have a lot of people all the time that ask me, how do you know what your purpose is, or how can you find your purpose? When you start doing things for other people without expecting anything in return, you see a major shift in your life and things start opening up. Because it really is, it's what you can do for others is when you really start receiving gifts from the universe.
What do you mean by that? Giving to others. I mean, there are also people that need to stop giving because they find that control is through what they give to others, hoping that they get back, and then they don't, and then they feel ripped off, and then they, so when you say giving to others.
To keep your emotion. Yeah, absolutely. You have to keep your emotions in check. I mean, if you're one of those people that always is constantly doing something for someone else or going out of your way to help other people, the people that are like that are constantly giving of themselves, I think if you ask them how do they feel all the time, or most of the time, they might tell you that, they don't always feel good, or they don't always feel respected or validated, so there's two sides to the coin there. I mean, you do things within reason. Once you feel good and your life is in alignment where it should be, you don't have that resentment or negative feelings. And I've come across actually a couple of people recently that asked me that similar question because they're always going out of their way for their family members, and they feel unappreciative or unappreciated by their this one particular person, by her daughter, and she goes above and beyond. But you have to also keep your emotions in check. If you're overloading, you always want to keep that pendulum swinging in the middle, so to speak. If you know what I'm saying?
Balance.
Yeah. So, it goes both ways, but I think, a lot of times we pass people up on the street, or you can walk by the bum on the street and just totally disregard them. But you'd be surprised if you just take a minute out to say hi, and maybe that's an extreme case, but I'm just saying it's not so much about it could be anything. Just giving of yourself, even in the most smallest ways, helping somebody out, and for those people that kind of go overboard, then for those people, they need to, kind of step back a little. But it really is, I always say it's that pendulum, because once it goes swinging all the way to the right, it's going to go swinging all the way to the left. So you want to try to keep yourself in check there, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, and sometimes giving without manipulation, giving without needing to do it because you think it's going to get you something in return is always the best way to give as well. However, we live in one of those societies often where the people that give out of the heart, from their heart, and the people that give to get are very hard to decipher from anymore. The disguises and masks are getting very, very good anymore. We can see it in advertising. We can see it in people that make promises to you on your emails from other companies. And of course, it's all gimmickry. But the main thing is that we have to remember that, as you said, you found wisdom. You found a message. Your message gave you incredible balance and psychic vision, which you have said is not something that you proclaim to be a psychic reader as much as you proclaim to have now kind of a third eye gift about things that come to you.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, waking up in the hospital a day later and being able to hear the thoughts of the nurse as if they were my own was, because that's exactly what happened, was a little eye-opening. You
Right.
go.
Right.
I went on vacation one person and woke up a day and a half later a completely different person. And, it took me a few years of trying to exactly understand what it was I was, experiencing. And I had a.
I have to share a little story here about one guest I had on that had a stroke, and he died and was officially gone for almost 15-20 minutes, and came back speaking a language that they had no idea. They just thought it was gibberish, and it ended up that he was speaking Lakota.
Wow.
So he had forgotten his English and taken on a new language when he came back, which everybody would have, passed off as being sloppy gibberish from his stroke, except that there was a Native American there that said, well, this man is, and he started communicating with him, and it took him almost 2 years to relearn English.
It's interesting. I've read stories about, I've never met, with the people I've met that have had a near-death experience, I haven't met anybody that had changed languages, but I've had people that completely did not know any of their family members, children included, and it's amazing what can happen to you when you go through this. And then the portion of our brain that we use is, it's such an interesting thing, and I think they're forever seeking knowledge on exactly how the brain works. When I woke up in the hospital, I had a day later, I had about 5 or 6 doctors that kept visiting my room and, wanted to know. They kept asking me a whole series of questions, because the first thing they asked me, I guess it was a day later, was, this normal questions. Who was the president? Do you know the date? Do you know your phone number? And I didn't know I wasn't able to answer not one single question of theirs. But
wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. And even the hardest part for me was when I did wake up, the day after my accident, there was like a separation of sorts between my physical body and my spiritual body. It was as if I was hovering about 3 or 4 inches outside of my body, and
astral projection.
Yeah, and I was listening to 2 different. So I was listening to. I could hear the voices in the hospital and the nurses and the nurses station outside the door, but I could also hear the chattering from the other side as well, and not all of it was in English. So it was kind of interesting. But for these people that wake up and they've had head trauma and they speak a different language, it's interesting. So
I think it's different for everybody, and I have to say that every time I have surgery, not lately, they found a new way to get around it, but I could tell doctors in fact, I would start joining in on the conversations that the nurses and the doctors were having, because I'd always be astral projecting above myself if I was in surgery. And it's like just something that happened the minute that I went into some kind of drug. It would bloop, up I'd go. But I can imagine that if that's what it is for me in surgery, I can sure imagine I'm kind of wondering, how amazing it's going to be when I do cross the other side. But I guess the main thing is, thank you. Nice topic, Ann Marie and Jennifer. Thank you. Connie says about the man who spoke Lakota, or the ones that didn't know a family. Some have said this was actually a walk-in, another soul in the body. What is Jennifer's opinion on walk-ins? Nice topic subject.
I have a walk-in. my experience with people walking in are people that actually walk into the room that are near me. The souls that come through from the other side, my experience is that they have a message to get across to somebody here, whoever it is. But my first experience with somebody, so to speak, walking in, or for me, was when I woke up in the hospital. The next day, there was a woman in the corner of the room that I was focused on while the doctors were trying to communicate with me, but my attention was not on them. It was with this woman in the corner of my room, and at first I couldn't understand why she was there, but I realized shortly after she was trying to help me make a transition back in my body and try to kind of understand, because when I first woke up, it was hard to kind of understand and speak clearly. You know, when the doctors and nurses started talking to me, I couldn't really understand what they were saying, or it was hard for me to, simple questions. It was hard for me. It was as if I was trying to change frequencies, I guess is the easiest way to put it.
I love the word frequency. Can I add to this about the walk-in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've just researched it. It says, what is a walk-in experience? And says, this is where two individual souls have agreed to switch places. The first soul has gone as far as it can in its development and is ready to move on. The soul that has taken its place will serve in a different capacity than before. Normally, permission has been granted in order for this to take place. Another way to call the experience is soul transference. You usually feel totally different. You will not necessarily recognize the people around you. You may have lapses of memory of the other occupant and will not be able to recognize the reason you came. It is usually quite a shock to the body, especially if this has happened due to a car accident, operation, or a very long illness. You will feel somewhat estranged from everyone around you, though you retain the memories of your body's past history. After all, you are a totally different entity.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. My experience with people coming in through the other side, whether it be to relay a message and it's interesting because you just said they make a contract with each other, an agreement with each other.
It's like, hey, Joe, I'm kind of tired of being here. Let's come on in and take over, will you? Kind of like that.
Yeah, for me, it's always been a little bit, it's always been a little bit scary. And when I have communication with people from the other side coming in, I ask them to come in during the daytime, during the daylight, because it's a little bit stressful for me, I guess is the nicest way to put it. But yeah, you make, like I said, you make an agreement before you come here. You figure out what it is you want to achieve in this lifetime, but you make an agreement with certain souls, whether it be your parents, your siblings, your best friends, and even your worst adversaries, as crazy as that sounds, to achieve what you need to achieve. But walk-ins from the other side, those are usually people even from talking to other people that are pretty familiar with this as well. You've had many lives together, so it could be somebody that was living here when you were living, or it could be somebody from a past life. But it's interesting that you when it occurs. For me, it's a little bit draining when that happens, so I prefer to not have walk-ins, so to speak, I guess is a nice way to put it.
I think she was trying to explain why the guy was speaking Lakota, because during the time that he was crossing over, he made a pact that someone else would take over his body. But the thing is, he did relearn English, but so in his mind, and I would say that his grandparents were Lakota. So he never knew the language, and he had completely left any belief system. And so it's funny how maybe that was transferred memories that we don't even know that we're doing. How many times have people had brain aneurysms where they forget everything in the now and only remember the past?
Yeah.
The way past. So there, like you said, the brain is so strange, and it's. I mean, it works in such strange ways, and it is such a computer. I mean, it is such amazing computer, but the only thing is, when that computer turns off, when it's off, is what we're talking about. We're talking about the time that the computer is off. We're talking about the time that there's no little blips and waves. We're talking about that time in everybody's life where there is supposed to be nothing going on. And so that's what you were going through.
Yeah. Even to this day, I still have little pockets of where there's memory losses, and when I try to think of times where things have been brought to my attention, it seems as though that's when I kind of get voices or hear messages from the other side. I guess would be kind of similar to what you're talking about with walk-ins.
Do you find yourself putting a clamp on yourself when you're doing that, or do you find yourself wanting to go head first and dive into that area completely, or are you in that what you call the balance?
I try to stay in the balance. I try to stay balanced as far as that goes, but also too, it depends on depends on what's going on in my life at that time, or that day, I should say. So it kind of varies, but
tell me about that. What do you mean by that?
Well, it depends if I'm having a little girl, you have to be having a child who's fairly young, you have to be on and 24/7, so to speak, trying to juggle that with work. I like to stay balanced, but before I had my child, I would spend a lot more time meditating, where I would be able to kind of really tap into bringing in individuals from the other side. But where my life is at now, I need to have much more balance, and it actually has worked out better, because it seems as though I get information when I need it, instead of having it flow continuously, which is how it was for me at one time. So I try to keep a balance. It's much easier that way, and it doesn't drain me like it used to. So
do you ever have instances where a smell or a aura or something will set those memories back?
Yeah, I did. It was fun. It's funny you say that, because I talk in my book about waking up psychic. I was in this car accident with a boyfriend of mine who unfortunately had died 2 weeks later in the hospital. So I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and he was as well, and he was in a coma, and he had passed away as a result of it. But it was funny yesterday, because I was finishing up some stuff with the second book, and I was thinking about him, and I could clearly smell his cologne that he wore from 25 years ago. And even though it's 25 years later, I still sometimes will second guess, am I fabricating this in my head, or, am I making this up? And then my daughter was sitting next to me, and she's like, do you have men's cologne on?
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, no.
Yes.
But when you hear from someone else, it's a good validation, even though I really don't need it all these many years later, but it happens all the time.
Right.
The smell of cologne or flowers or whatever.
I had a girlfriend, my best friend, right before she died. She was having a horrible problems with bad boys, and she says, "You know, if I could just have the perfect guy." And I said, "Who would that be?" "Jesus Christ." Well, okay, but just about the time we were in a grotto, and all of a sudden, when she said that, one of the stalactites fell and hit her in the head, and she goes, "Crap." And I said, "Why?" "What?" She says, "I'm going to die." And I said, "What?" She was gone 2 weeks later in a car accident, going 90 around the curves in a Mustang convertible. And she was with another woman, and the woman had a daughter, and that her Carol unfortunately died, with a fence post through her head, and her friend who went into shock, kind of got to safe haven, not realizing where she was. And her daughter said that she woke up at nighttime and that she said Carol had been there. And she says, "What?" And she says Carol was there, and she was with a guy with really long hair and a white light. So I always, like to think that Carol found her true love image, at least, in the other side. But every time that I would think about Carol, after that, I would smell Victoria's Secret, because she had that. And there's been a couple of times I was with the woman that was in a crash with her, and we'd smell the smell together in our favorite dressing rooms at stores and things. So it was like she was there. So yeah, he was there with you. He wants to share your book with you. He's sharing in your joy.
Oh, absolutely. Every time I've moved in 25 and a half years, he's always come around and made himself known. And the first few years it happened, I would see him and I thought, again, I thought it was just me. I'm crazy a little bit. I'm just seeing things. But then I think the first time somebody else saw him was in 1993, when I moved into a new apartment in Florida. And my girlfriend, and I write about this in the book, my girlfriend was over and she heard something from the living room, and she ran out there because she thought somebody had broke into my apartment. And she couldn't believe it. She came back in my bedroom and said, "Nobody's there." And I said, "Yeah, I know, it's Tony." And she was like, "What?" And she's like, "Oh my God." She didn't actually see him, but she heard him. But then a few years after that, I had a couple over at my house that I had just met, and we both had bulldogs. We had met at the emergency room while both of our dogs had gotten hurt or whatever. And we became friends, and I invited him over to my house a couple weeks later. And we're sitting in my living room, and the girl's husband, Bill, who's not a little guy, he was like 6'3", big guy, looked like he had seen a ghost. And he was like, "Jennifer, is there someone else in your house?" And I said, "No." "Why?" And he goes, "Because I just saw a guy about 5'9" walking down your hall." And he described what my boyfriend had.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that was early on. But then over the years, it had happened so many other times when I would move that other people would see him. And I write about this because for me, as much as at first I was a little embarrassed about it, because, I didn't know what people thought about seeing somebody that had passed on or whatever, but it did at least give me validation that, I wasn't so much crazy, that I wasn't the only one that was seeing him. But yeah, my boyfriend really did come through quite a bit over the years, to the point that other people would see him.
And the name of your book?
Waking Up Psychic.
And when is it going to be out?
It should be out the middle of March, towards the end of March, middle to end of March.
The publisher?
Tate Publishing.
And your website?
PsychicsUniverse.com.
Thank you so much for being with us, and we hope that you come back again, Jennifer. And we just want to thank you for giving us something new and different to talk about today, and loved having you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Take care, girlfriend.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
psychic radio, holistic radio, spiritual radio. This is AchieveRadio.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/Achieve.